I've pulled in your code from this awesome survey example. I'd love to have you just kind of walk me through the pieces and explain how it all works. And
Sure.
actually, maybe before we get into the code, if you can just talk through like what is the awesome survey example that you made? Like what's the data that obviously fake data that you put together?
Sure. So, what I wanted to do for the example is kind of get as close to what I've been encountering in the wild as possible. So a lot of the Google Forms that I had to deal with and process are ones that had different, like logic paths on them, like different sections. And I did that intentionally because it makes the data kind of output in a weird way because they're nesting columns and different stuff like that. So, for this one, I kind of just had really basic demographic, like, oh, how old are you? Do you like to play video games? I love to play video games. That's why, I put it there. Then it kind of just asks you about your favorite video games. And then I think the next one kind of goes into, music. Yeah. The next one goes into music and it's just asking like, oh, like, what's your favorite artist? So I wanted to give a mix of questions that were multiple choice where you could only select one option, then questions that were, select all that apply, the checkbox questions, and then like an open-ended, just to kind of give a real example of different things that have to encounter in the wild.
All right, so I'm looking at the data here, and we can imagine that this comes from a survey done with Google Forms where just someone gets asked these questions. So here, let me just be slightly wider. Okay, so do you like to play video games? How old are you? What kind of games? Favorite game? Some music genres that you like, and who is your favorite artist? Okay. Just so folks like kind of know what the data that we're working with is. So why don't you then kind of point me to like how I would, if you were working on this, where like explain the different parts of it and how everything works.
Sure. So I see that you're just kind of on the directory. So this is just how I always organize my things. I don't have any tips on like the best practices for this. This is just how I do this. So I always have a folder for data, a folder for any kind of reports, and for scripts. So if we're going to look at the actual code for this, we would be going into the scripts folder. Okay. Now, the main script that does everything is the docking script, which is that first script listed there.
All right. So let's talk about how this works. So looks like first you're just loading a few packages, Tidyverse, Google Sheets 4, and then Janitor. So you're setting data updated to be equal to false. I assume that's going to be related to this down here when we're actually determining whether or not to pull in new data.
Right.
Is that right?
Correct. So, this is like the most manual part. So when you do set up your scripts to do this, there's probably some way we can automatically pull this, but I'm not going to try to figure that out. So basically what you need to do, if you have a spreadsheet that's already live and living on your Google Drive somewhere, you need to pull the URL for it. So, cause we need to feed that into Google Sheets. So that's what that main spreadsheet variable is or value is.
So that was just, I delete that, paste in that just to show folks that was the same exact.
Yep.
All right. So I'll run that. So we have that defined for later.
So the next line, this is kind of starting to set up that authentication where it's going to say like, hey, like, can I connect to your Google account? Things like that. And I've wrapped it in some extra things. And I'm trying to remember. I feel like for the original script I had this in, there was an issue where like I had this really long script of a lot of things going on, and whenever I hit the source button, it would like skip over things. So if there was an error with like, an address, a Gmail address wasn't found or something else, it wasn't giving the user time to respond back to it. So,
Gotcha.
so I put in this read line prompt, functions or group of functions to kind of make the console stop and be like, hey, are you sure this is the address you want to do? Whatever.
So when I run that, it gives me this thing, this prompt here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay to cache OAuth access credentials?
Mm-hmm.
I have, of course, used Google Sheets for, so it's not sending me to the browser
Right.
to authenticate that way,
Right.
but it's just going to ask me that, and I'll say yes. Oh, wait, did do that. Okay, so then it just says authentication complete, close this page and return to R. And I see, so you've added this where you have to hit enter to confirm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now at this point, I'm authenticated, which means I can actually use this data, or I can use the Google Sheets API or the Google Sheets 4 package using the API to get that data directly from Google Sheets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it looks like you're next using the read sheet function.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that comes from Google
Yes,
Sheets
it does.
4.
Yep.
So let me even just run this to see. Okay, so if I look at that, I can see. So it's pulled in that exact data here and created a tibble based on that.
Yep.
Cool. So it actually looks in many ways really similar. I mean, it's same idea as like read CSV, read underscore CSV, but the only thing that looks different here is you need to set the sheet, and I assume that is the name here in case you have like multiple sheets or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let me run that because then it looks like you just select a few of the variables.
Yeah.
So I'll take a look there. Okay, perfect. So now that seemed very simple, but that's actually in many ways like the most kind of profound part of this is pulling in data that way as opposed to, and again, it's simple, but it's if you think about the opposite approach, which would be to go file, download CSV, then you copy that CSV into your RStudio project, then you run, have code to open that CSV. And I don't even know what it calls them. I guess it just calls it awesome survey example. I was thinking if it calls it something like different depending on the date, then it might be different. But in any case, what you're able to do is just have code that is, automatically pulls in whatever data is there. All right, so this is actually something I hadn't seen before. So talk me through how you do this kind of data validation to check if there's any differences between what was there, what you have already previously saved and what's on Google Sheets now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, for this example, this is a really, really simplified, version. Like in the wild, I have to do more advanced stuff than this, like checking data types, everything. But the purpose of this, script here is to see like, okay, are there any more rows added? Right. So in order to do that, when you're setting up and doing all of this for the first time, you kind of have to do this work that you're not going to reproduce again. In a sense of creating a master data file to get it started. So, I mean, if you're going to do this, there's an anticipation that you might already have some data live on Google and you might not. But the processing script that's kind of like under this, a few lines down, has it where after, we verify that, okay, we brought in new data, we've done whatever we needed to do, it will save a new master file if there's been any changes. So pretty much you just have one data frame to start with that is going to act as your master. And then whatever kind of way you choose to check if there's changes, whether there's actual variable value changes or row column changes, whatever, you instill that. And if a change is detected, that line number 31 is going to switch the data updated variable that we had at the beginning, and it's going to switch it to true if there's some change in the number of rows for this. Yeah.
So this is saying if n row of new data, which in this case is 4,
Mm-hmm.
is not equal to n row of master data, which is also 4.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not, this is a double negative. If it's not equal to that,
Mm-hmm.
which it's not, no, sorry, it is equal to that. So this will be
Mm-hmm.
false because they actually are
Right.
equal. And so data updated will actually continue to be
False. Right.
false.
Right. And I mean, like for that, like that logic component, that really just works however your brain works. So if it's easier,
Sure,
if it's
sure.
easier for you to have an equality comparison there instead of a non-equality, then totally change that to work.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so then it looks like what you're doing is you're basically saying only if this is the same as saying if data updated equals true, then run that.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I actually try and run this, it's not going to run because data updated does not equal true, it equals
Right.
false. Let's actually just look briefly though what's in that processing
Sure.
script.
Yeah, what did
So
I do?
this, yeah. Well, yeah. Why don't you talk me through what you
Yeah, so it looks like it's just just cleaning. Okay, so I pulled the data in and listen, I hope no one is gonna make fun of me for like my naming conventions, but this is just kind of how I do it. If I'm pulling in
Yep.
a data frame and I'm modifying it, I add underscore mod to the name so that I can kind of keep track of like, okay, all I did was modify things here. I modified it again. And usually I'll have some kind of documentation outside of R that's explaining like, okay, in this data frame, this is the changes that happened or whatever. Basically what this is doing is pulling the data in as is. And, what I was kind of referencing before about having those different sections in Google Forms, if you pull it down like raw, it kind of does this weird, thing where like, so for your checkbox answers, like your questions where you can select all that apply, it, combines them into like one huge string of your string values kind of separated by commas.
Like that.
Yeah. So in order to kind of work to get to that, there's this whole process of like, oh, I need to clean my names because to make the survey readable to the human eye, they can't having like underscores and everything in them. Because what ends up happening is that the variable names are just essentially the questions. So you're not like typing your questions in like an actual readable code format. So there's this process of cleaning that and then renaming it to make that process easier for you on the back end. Like, cause I don't want to sit there and be like, oh, do underscore you underscore like you'll just go ahead and just rename them. Then I relocated some things there just because I'm really like anal about like where my things are. You don't have to do that.
I get it. I get it.
But like a lot of this is what I'm doing is, just kind of prepping it for whatever the next stages are. So I see like that last one on line 14, I'm adding a factor because I'm like, oh, like I want to keep this in a certain order. These are numeric categories, but they're not, it's just little quirky things, whatever I ran into.
Sure.
That's where, that's what's in here. Mm-hmm.
And so then we have new data mod, which isn't actually going to necessarily look different, although, for example, age is a factor, which it wasn't when we just have new data. So if I just hover there, you can see that that's a character as opposed to a factor. So that looks like you're recoding missing values for all factors. Which doesn't actually, oh no. Or no, sorry, you're recoding.
So,
where it's
yeah.
Everything that's not
everything that's not a factor,
sorry.
right?
Okay. So then here, you end up with this new data mod 2. And this is an example where you have, for example, if you look at like music genres, people could select multiple things and they show up in that kind of format where they're comma separated but within a single cell,
Mm-hmm.
within a single a cell in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to get like too deep into tidy data because it's not really the
I
main
know.
topic of what we're discussing. But the main thing you're doing then is you're getting this into a tidy format.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about these 3 lines, how they work and what they're doing.
Sure. So I'm just pulling from that last modified data frame, just piping it. And I'm taking out anything that's not music related or anything that I felt didn't need to be in this data frame. So I just took out anything that contained the word game. So any column, any variable that contained the word or the string game. Then that last line, I believe that's from the tidier package. And what that does is it will split those comma separated values into their own variable, I believe.
All right, so let's go ahead and run that, and then I'm going to open up new data music. So now, yeah, I can see, for example, music genres for participant 1, looks like they listed like 9 different things, and they're each on their own line. But that favorite artist, which was only one thing, you can see it just shows up 9
Right.
times for them because they again, it was only one thing. So actually, I'm just looking at one thing because I think, let's see, I'm guessing that's top 40.
Oh, look at you. You caught something. Yes. Yeah. So
So I'm guessing you probably want to add.
yeah. Yep.
I think it was separating by, I don't remember what the default is for separate rows.
I felt like I thought the space or
maybe?
comma, one of them.
Oh, it's some regex that I am terrible
Oh,
at.
geez. Me too. Oh, gosh.
It looks like I think that's looking for non-character or something.
Oh, man. You're better than me.
In any case, like what I do, the only reason I'm thinking about this so much is I actually, one of my consultants actually just wrote a blog post about working with this exact type of data.
Fair enough.
So, like a separator like that is what we'll usually do. Cool. So I think it's a good point. Like, and this is a bit far afield from the specific focus today, but like this idea that you take your data and put it into multiple data frames, or tables is really helpful because people, I think, too often think, okay, this is my data. I need to keep it in this exact, one data frame that's this many rows, this many columns. Like, no, what you're showing is you can actually put it into multiple data frames. You can see you even have one here with new data games that you create that's just about like games that they play. And then looks like you save each of those separately.
Yep. Yes, I do. And I do this because honestly, so I got into the habit of doing this, and I'm not going to sit here and say whether it's best practice or not, but I had ran into so many issues thinking that I had to keep my data together. And where that will get you is when you are trying to work with ggplot. Because for different things you're trying to visualize, it might be you need things grouped differently, or like if you're trying to do something fancy and you need to pull something out, it's kind of just like, man, if I just had a separate data frame for this, I would probably have less headaches.
Definitely. Yep. All right. So thinking back to this docking script. So even though we just showed all that actually wouldn't have run because data updated was actually not equal to true. So all that here only happens if there essentially is new data in this Google Sheet that differs from the data that you already have saved. And so you make 3 different objects. You also make a unique artist, which has a list of unique artists, and then you save those as RDS
Yep.
files. And then talk about this, how you're like saving the new copy as the master file, replacing the old master file. What's up with that?
So I have started doing that because it'll be that I'll have a good few weeks where nothing is broken, and then something is broken, and then I need to revert back to something to try to kind of like trace my steps. So if you add this, because what's going to end up happening is that that next line under there, I think line number 42, what it's doing is that if it gets to that point in the script and there were no errors thrown, my logic here that I've programmed in is that, okay, if you got to this point, we can save this as the new master. You've already saved everything. You've done your processing. You're good. This is now your new master. So if something ends up happening where like we should not have saved it as a new master, like there's an error, or like, I don't know what would happen in this specific example, but I've had instances where, especially like if I'm geoprocessing something, like, and I'm using all of that time to like calculate things. So, I have screwed myself. So, what this is doing is kind of like giving you a safeguard of like, oh, you messed that up. Hey, we have this like old master file here you can revert back to. So this would require you manually going in and like, I don't know, opening up the old master data file and then resaving that as master data, something like that. However, the individual is going to end up debugging for that.
Gotcha. So you rename it and then you save the new data that you brought in as that master data. So again, you have the most recent version that you've brought in as master data and old master data as the previous version in case whatever happens. And then you have a couple things here where you're removing everything that was created as part of this script and then just sending a message. Cool. So pretending that new data was actually brought in, then what you actually do, you have a couple other steps in this docking script. You're actually first, and this is interesting, this is a different way than I typically do it, not that it's better or worse, but you have a viz script where you're actually making all of your visualization. So talk about how that works.
Sure. So I started breaking down my code like this because what would end up happening was I'd be on top of the world and be like, oh my God, I got like this 4,000 line script and it's doing amazing things. Yeah. But then when something goes wrong, it is a pain in the behind to find what's wrong. So if I have it modularized like this, I at least have a better picture of like, okay, where did my thing fail? What's the problem? So this is just a convenience factor for me because my brain, like if I see too many lines, like my brain just dies. I don't know. I have to keep everything separate. Yeah.
So you're actually then reading in the data that you actually had just saved in the processing script. Again, if it's different than was already saved. And then you are making a visual. Wait, is this looks like two of the same thing?
Is it making a visual? Oh, yeah, because I was trying to like, I was gonna make more, but then I kind of just like was like, I don't have time for this. So I just
no, that's fine.
Yeah, so ignore those first three lines.
All right. So you make a visualization, and I'll just comment that out and like show, okay, here's the visualization, and then you save it as games viz. And then what you do is you actually save games viz, that object, as an RDS file in reports plots game viz.rds. And what that allows you to do then is in this last step is where you're actually doing the reporting.
So that'll be in the reports file. Yeah, that RMD.
So you have an R Markdown document that brings this in. Well, yeah, actually maybe talk through this first code chunk after the setup code
Mhm.
chunk. What's this doing here and how does that work?
Yes. So what I did was bring in a copy of the master data file. So basically just a copy of the data that came directly from Google Forms. In this case, though, this
Mm,
was before any kind of modification or anything happened to it. Basically, the main concept here is that I am bringing in the data as it came in. Pretty much as it came in before I tried to start like pulling everything apart for the visuals. Because what I end up seeing a lot of the time is that it's really useful for when I am doing like not so much visuals, but if I have like text or like I'm dropping in inline R code and I want to pull it directly
yeah,
from the data, it helps me to just easily reference that if I have it in the markdown session here.
cool. So if I run this, for example, it brings in and creates an object called survey
Mm-hmm.
data that just has participant ID and their
Right.
age. And then you're bringing in games data and artists, which is uh, part of the data that you saved previously in that processing script. So you saved, I think it was right
Mm-hmm.
there. Let me make sure. Yep, that favorite artist, which you're then reading in
Mm-hmm.
here. And so games data again was an RDS
Mm-hmm.
file that you saved. Then you take that survey data and you just make, for example, make a
Yeah.
table of all participants. Um, and obviously, you can do whatever
Yeah.
you want in terms of making your table look nicer and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Again, that's not really the point
Right.
here. But let me run
Sure.
this code chunk.
Mm-hmm.
So what you've done is you've actually read in that
Mm-hmm.
gameviz.rds to an object called gamesviz, and then you just
Mm-hmm.
display it here. Uh, and that allows you to then have it included in your
Right.
report. Um, cool. One last thing you did, you used some, you talked before about inline
Mm-hmm.
R code. If someone isn't familiar with inline R code, explain what it is and how you use it
Sure.
here.
So it's a way for you to add our code in line with some text that you have. So I usually use it when I am trying to have a paragraph or any kind of section of text where I'm referencing data. It's really a good way to keep some integrity with your data. If you're like, oh, we had 50 participants, and it might be that in that little inline R code, you're reading the number of rows of data if each row is a participant or something like that. So it's just a really quick way for you to kind of just drop in like I use it to drop in values of things, calculations, really quick counts.
Mm-hmm.
I've never used it for anything like, I don't even know if you can use it for anything that's like really expensive. But I usually use that if I have like values I need to drop in, whether they are numeric, categorical, or string, like I've done here.
Yeah, so you took the vector
Mhm.
artists and okay, what is this function? Because I think I need this
Yes,
function
this
and I don't
function
know
is
it.
great. So this is from the knitter package. So what it will do is it will take all of any like a vector of strings that you give it, and it will automatically give you an Oxford comma and an and at the end. It is
Oh my
amazing.
goodness.
It's
Okay,
amazing.
I don't I have needed this so many times and I've made such hacky code to do
Yeah,
this
no,
again.
I found it because I had one of the work that like I do have publicized is like I have a dashboard that the my county department uses, and there's a section where we list like any kind of suspected drugs that we might have found. So it was perfect
Mm,
for that because a lot of times like you might have like multiple values. And I was just like, man, there's no way that I'm gonna go ahead and like code all of this manually.
oh my goodness. Yeah, wow. Okay, that is amazing. So when you knit this, you end up with this report. Obviously, again, could improve
Of course.
visualizations. Don't focus on that. But you end up, for example, here, that text is outputted. Nirvana, the Beatles, MGK, and
Mhm,
Guar. You have your visualization and your table as
mhm.
well. So if I go back to the original docking script, you actually have code that will render that. So if I run that, that will just update that example
Yep.
report, and it hasn't changed. No, nothing has changed, so it's going to look exactly the
Right.
same. But let me actually go in for a second
Sure.
to here. And let's pretend that we got some new
Sure.
data. Actually, let me add someone
Mhm.
new. Fresh prints. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and just restart
Sure.
my session. But if I just run this whole
Mhm.
script, unless I mess something up, I'm going to put it kind of back exactly how it was. I don't think I messed anything up. In theory, what it should do is go to Google Sheets, bring in my
Mhm,
data, process my data using the processing script, because now data updated should be set to true because there are 5 rows, whereas there was 4
mhm,
before. It'll create those visuals, save them like we showed before in that viz
mhm.
script, and then it will render this report with that
Right.
new data. Okay,
Sure.
let's try. Oh, wait.
Oh yeah. See, this is why I have the source and the and the block, because the block won't work without the source. Like it lets you source it.
Yep. Oh, wait, did that?
Yeah. So now you're gonna have to. So I would suggest just pressing the source button and then letting it do its thing, because then it'll stop the script for you.
Oh, I have never
See?
seen that.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. So, okay, that was
Mhm.
really fast. Let's go back here. And again, we've got 4 rows
You gotta
here.
refresh it though.
Let's,
No.
yeah,
Mhm.
let me, perfect. So now I've got 5 rows. I've got my new person here, my charts updated, and the favorites have also updated because we can see fresh prints is there. So we've done that in a really simple way, but if you're doing something where you're getting like dozens or hundreds of surveys, the cool thing is you can do this kind of at
Mhm.
will and automatically get updated data whenever you
Right.
want. So
Yeah.
that's super
Love it.
cool. Cool. Was there anything I asked you about in this code that I should
No,
have?
I think you touched on like most of the main important parts, because I think the biggest thing I think when people see something like this is they always ask me like, why do you break everything up? I'm like, because you don't understand.
Mm,
You don't understand all the hours of
yeah.
crying I did because I couldn't find things.
Yeah, definitely. I'll even show actually I was the call I had earlier today was with do you know who Matt Herman
I don't think so.
is?
Hmm.
Uh anyway, he made this, I'll show you. He actually made a really amazing COVID tracking website for Westchester County, New
Okay.
York. And I
Ooh.
was he was showing me how it all works, and he has a very similar
Mm-hmm.
approach. So I think it was, wait, oh no, in the R, um, this, for example, you can see he's got one R. The website has multiple data
Right.
sources, so there's basically one script for each source that he's pulling
Mm-hmm.
data from. So there's like hospital occupancy data, there's hotspot
Mm-hmm.
zones, but very similar kind of modularized
So I do this
approach.
too with a unfortunately, but one I can't show you. It's like the all of my
Yeah,
Nalox
yeah,
tracker stuff. I have this as well because I have it coming
sure.
from different sources. So it makes sense to like
Yep,
break it down and have different data or different scripts for different data sources. Mhm.
totally, totally. Um, Cool. Well, Megan, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If people want to connect with you, where would be the best place to do
Best
that?
place is probably Twitter. At my handle, it's my first name. It's at MEGHANSHARRIS. That's my full name, Meghan S. Harris. I am also on LinkedIn as well. I believe that name is just my first name and last name. So MEGHAN little dash and Harris, HARRIS.
Super. And I'll say if people follow you on Twitter, they can also see some
Ha.
of the really cool art,
They could get
generative art
spammed by
that
my art.
you do. It's not spam. People love it. I love seeing it. It's really cool to see what else art
I
can
try
do.
to, calm down with it a little bit. Sometimes I'm just like, I get super excited.
Yeah. I mean, there's a great community of people who make generative art with R. So, super. Well, thanks again, Megan. I appreciate you talking
Thank you
with me
so
today.
much, David. Thank you for inviting me.